Let's discuss this with MSNBC's Chris Jansing, former speechwriter for President Obama, David Litt, Bloomberg White House correspondent, Kayla Gardner, and SiriusXM host and former director of progressive media for the Clinton campaign, Zerlina Maxwell. So, Chris, what was the feeling last night as both Obamas closed out day two?
Jose, I'd say electrifying, and that's just their presence. Then came the speeches. Look, a couple of obvious things. These are two of the most beloved people in the Democratic Party and have been for years. They are also two of the most skilled rhetorical politicians, and she's not even a politician, that have been in modern times. They know how to write and to give a speech, and boy, did they, exceeding expectations. All she had to do was walk out on stage, and the emotion was palpable. Women were crying. Her presence here was so important. I think there are a couple of things that they, as you mentioned, wanted to do. Some expected, a couple less expected. First of all, she really lifted up Kamala Harris, someone she knows, someone she likes. Also, the same with Barack Obama, but he then went a little step further. He honored the man who was his vice president, Joe Biden. And I think there was also a note of caution, and that's the political part of the speech. That's the final message. You get people worked up, and then you say, but. Here's the but from both of them.
The torch has been passed. Now it is up to all of us to fight for the America we believe in. And make no mistake, it will be a fight. For all the incredible energy we've been able to generate over the last few weeks, for all the rallies and the memes, this will still be a tight race in a closely divided country.
So no matter how good we feel tonight or tomorrow or the next day, this is going to be an uphill battle.
Some sobering words from both of them, but I think that the intensity was really surrounding Michelle Obama, and she did a couple of critical things. First, she invoked hope. That's the same theme that her husband first ran on. And these speeches all get cleared through the campaign. This was a very specific thing. They have turned the page here. They have gone away from the malaise that was in this party, and they want it to be joyful. They want it to be hopeful. But also more surprising was the way she went after Donald Trump, really attacking both on behalf of this party, but something very personal to her in the way that Donald Trump has addressed her family all these years. And so I think what we're seeing now is a fired up electorate here, even more than they were on Monday, but people who got what they wanted, Anna and Jose, and that is a denunciation of the man that Kamala Harris is running against.
So much has happened since the Obamas were in the White House, but Zerlina, this through line, this message of hope that came out again in the speech, Michelle Obama declaring hope is making a comeback. This is a stark contrast with Trump's politics of fear, but fear sells. It worked for him in 2016. How do Democrats make their vision appeal over Trump's message and tone?
Look, I think what you saw last night was a message of hope plus determination. That's why you had the call outs in Michelle Obama's speech saying do something. And I think that that's something that I keep hearing from people as I walk around the convention this week. Everyone is joyful. They are feeling exuberant. They are feeling hope. But they also know that they have to do the work to make this happen. And another thing I think was really important about what Michelle Obama did last night is she didn't sugarcoat. She spoke directly to many of the divisive topics that Donald Trump likes to go back to, like misogyny and racism and bigotry. And I think that we needed to hear that clarity from somebody like Michelle Obama to understand the stakes of this moment. The stakes are high, but our mood is even higher.
Yeah, I mean, and David, I was just wondering, as a former Obama speechwriter, what stood out to you last night about those speeches?
Well, I think both of them were standout speeches, but just to talk again about the former First Lady's speech,
I think one of the things that she has always talked about, if you look at her convention speeches, they're almost like, now a quadrilogy of speeches, and it's this gratitude for this country. And she didn't just talk about Trump. She talked about Trump in the context of who we are, how any of us wouldn't get the kinds of second and third and fourth chances that he gets. And the anger that she had was not just directed at him, but it was this sense of righteous indignation on behalf of all of us who are watching, no matter who we vote for. And I think that idea of, deep down, are you grateful for everything this country has given you, or are you a whiner and a complainer? I think we're seeing that contrast start to build stronger and stronger, and that's a really important pivotal moment on a Tuesday of a convention, right? It's when the convention goes from question mark to exclamation point. And I think both Obamas, now this is an exclamation point convention.
And we heard from Michelle Obama in particular talking about what comes next, the work that's left for Democrats. Here's more.
It's up to us to remember what Kamala's mother told her. Don't just sit around and complain. Do something. So if they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. If we see a bad poll, and we will, we got to put down that phone and do something. If we start feeling tired, if we start feeling that dread creeping back in, we got to pick ourselves up, throw water on our face, and what? We did it before, y'all, and we sure can do it again. Let us work like our lives depend on it. And let us keep moving our country forward and go higher.
Kayla, the stakes and that framing, what did it suggest to you about the role the Obamas may have for the remainder of this campaign?
Well, I think for one, something I really reflected on yesterday is just how much of a change candidate Barack Obama was to politics, period. The ground game that he built in 2008 and 2012 was really been replicated even by the Republican Party. And that is what Harris is exactly trying to do. And just to show how much regard she has for him, she campaigned for him in 2008, and so, or 2008, I'm sorry. And so she has really shown how much she has regarded him at a time when many Democrats were straying away from him. And she has brought people on to her team who worked on those campaigns, and she's just trying to replicate that. So this was a passing of baton from not only Biden to Harris, but also Obama to Harris, and really her trying to take on the same mantle and build the same coalition that he built in those elections.
So what also, when it came to attacks on Trump, the Obamas really tried to use his own words against him. Here's a little bit of that. Listen to it.
Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. It has been a constant stream of gripes and grievances that's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes.
Zelina, after Michelle Obama's memorable 2016 line, they go low, we go high, bigger picture for Democrats, how has the approach to taking on Trump evolved?
I think it's about getting real, and it's about talking about the damage that Donald Trump did to our country and to our democracy, and also the damage he potentially can do to our country if he gets back into the White House and they implement many of the provisions, Democratic ending provisions in Project 2025. I also think that the framing about Donald Trump only caring about himself and just being a constant stream of complaining. He was banned from Twitter, but before that, we all would wake up every single morning of the Trump administration to see what the president of the United States was complaining about on Twitter overnight, literally tweeting in the middle of the night and not caring about the regular average American and what their concerns are. Even in his speech recently, where he stood in front of a bunch of groceries, he was personally attacking Kamala Harris and complaining about all types of things, but not talking about the solutions to any of the problems that the average American family is thinking about every single day. And I think that that's something that came through even as the Obamas yesterday directly talked about and criticized Donald Trump. They are also talking about the issues that diverse arena of Americans cares very much about.
Well, and Americans really do know who Donald Trump is, so none of those, I think, attacks or those pointed remarks against Trump were surprising for Americans to hear. They knew exactly what they were referring to, but there are still a lot of people getting to know Kamala Harris. And so we heard from the second gentleman as well, who is not a politician. He really focused on the personal side of who Kamala Harris is. Let's watch.
Of course, my mind went to all the potential crises that the vice president could be dealing with. Was it domestic? Was it foreign? Was it campaign? I could see she was focused, and all I knew was that it must be something important. And it turns out it was. Ella had called her. That's Kamala. That's Kamala. Those kids are her priorities, and that scene was a perfect map of her heart. She's always been there for our children, and I know she'll always be there for yours, too.
David, we hear him talk about Kamala, the mother figure, and how she integrates his family into her world. Do the aims change when writing or delivering a speech in a venue like this when it's not a career politician, somebody like Emhoff?
Well, I think we've been talking about Michelle Obama's speeches and as a first spouse, and then now we have Doug Emhoff speaking as a second gentleman and potentially the first gentleman. And I do think the spouse has credibility that almost no one else has because they know that person better than anybody. It often really helps that they're not politicians. You know, one thing, the voters who are going to decide this election do not like politics. And so to have somebody say, this is just this person, this is who she is when the cameras are off, when we're making dinner, when her stepdaughter calls, that is really compelling stuff, and it in a way the lack of politicalness about it, I guess that's a technical term, but that lack of politician-y rhetoric, it can be very effective because most of us don't speak that way.
Yeah, and I mean, there is so much of an effort, and understandably so, in helping to define Vice President Harris. It's such a short period of time that she's actually now the Democratic standard bearer. There's so little time left. But Kayla, vice presidential nominee Tim Walz is going to be speaking tonight. Talk about someone who has a very little national profile. What can we expect in this key moment for him as he introduces himself to the United States?
Yeah, Walz has been really interesting to watch because he's not someone who had a major profile. As you said, he really was a dark horse in the vice presidential search, and he's really risen. But I think the role that he has taken on in this campaign is really as an attack dog, going toe-to-toe with J.D. Vance on these very personal, sometimes insults. And he's been sharing his own personal stories about his wife's struggles to having children and really talking about the freedoms that I expect Democrats are going to continue to talk about in this election, talking about abortion rights, talking about gun violence, talking about education. And that is really the role that the campaign is hoping to use with him.